Part of me was tempted to put on my Missy cosplay, but it is so hot I've actually got the fan on, so apologies for background noise. There's no way I'm putting that coat on. Welcome, folks, to another installment of I didn't think I had that much to say about this, and then I started thinking about it and tried to say it short and realized I couldn't. I legit initially intentioned to make just a short addressing what I'm going to be talking about, and then slowly realized that to talk about it fully and properly required references that needed context, and giving those things context would take time, and well, suddenly it's not a short. I don't know how long it will be, but I want to take a look at something specific that happened in order to talk about a broader idea through the lens of that specific instance. So, a little while ago, there was the announcement of the cast for the Harry Potter full cast audio drama. That included a fair few number of names that I certainly didn't appreciate seeing. Hugh Laurie hit a lot of people in a bad way. For me, the big one was Michelle Gomez, who, as a Doctor Who fan, that's the main thing I know her from, but I like her a lot, not just as a performer. What I've seen of her in behind-the-scenes stuff and interviews, she just seems like someone that I would like to be in the presence of. She's been very high priority on my list of Doctor Who-related people I would really like to get a photo op with. But she's going to be playing Professor McGonagall. And that hurt. Hey there, folks, it's Vera from The Edit. In the interest of avoiding any confusion and in the wake of last week's video where I put my overall point so far towards the back that people who didn't get all the way there misunderstood what it was I was getting to, let me make something really clear now so there's no misunderstanding of this. Any support of JK Rowling is bad. And the reason is, JK Rowling is a massive freaking turf and an active danger to trans people the world over. I've made this point before. In fact, I made this point so well before, I'm just going to pull a clip from the last time I had to say this. We will not today be debating the issue or the question of whether or not JK Rowling is transphobic. She is. This video is going to proceed forward, and just take that as read. If you are not convinced, and you actually sincerely are not convinced and would like to see the evidence that she is transphobic, here's a video. Here's 5 videos. So with that, hopefully all now well established, I now return you to your originally scheduled programming. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how I felt initially, what's happened since, how I feel about it now, but the overarching lens that we are putting on all of this is the general notion of how much grace should we be giving people? Now, that's an open question, and one that the answer is going to vary from person to person. Here's the stance I am going to take overall, and I am going to use this specific thing and some specific people in it to validate this. But my overall feeling is that while there are certainly things that can taint someone in your eyes, treating it all equivalent and painting everybody with the exact same brush as if what they did is the exact same thing as what somebody else who did something, at least in my mind, more egregious did, is unhelpful and a little unfair. Now, is this me making excuses for a performer that I like? I'm not going to say it's not in the mix anywhere, but I feel pretty comfortable with where I'm at, and I don't feel like I'm making excuses. But again, I will be justifying what I have to say. So, obviously, you shouldn't need an update on this, but just in case. The issue here is that anything Harry Potter related in some way benefits JK Rowling. It obviously benefits her financially when there is success for these things. There's probably initial payouts that she gets when these projects are started, and then she likely gets residuals off of them as well. Not all authors do, many don't, but also many authors are not in full control of something as big as Harry Potter. She has a lot of leverage. She gets residuals. So there is the obvious financial support. of who she is and the issue of what she's been doing with her money. And then also there's just the general notion of keeping Harry Potter as a live, active franchise as opposed to, a series of books that's done. That is something that also keeps her relevant. And she's using both the money and the relevancy to hurt trans people. And yes, I know some people go, she's defending women. She's not. She's attacking trans people. That is what all of these gender critical TERF groups, especially in the UK, are doing. They are not fighting for better equal rights, better representation of women in government or in entertainment or any of that. Better domestic violence laws. They are only targeting trans people. That is all that they do. She has literally started a legal fund for the explicit and exclusive purpose of bringing legal action against trans people and their rights. It is stated on the organization's front page that this is all that they exist to do. That is her only goal in anything these days. That is what she uses her money for. We know that she backed the case that recently resulted in a horrendous Supreme Court decision over in the UK. She has been financially backing numerous individuals and TERF organizations. We know what her resources go to. And therefore, anything Harry Potter related, whether you as a consumer buy it or somebody as a performer is in it, benefits her. Now, is a performer being in something directly putting money in her pocket? No, but you are backing a project that's directly putting money in her pocket, so you're at most a half step away. And I have gone multiple times off on why you cannot separate the art from the artist in general, and especially in this instance, because this isn't the thing that she did or said or believed and said once. This is a thing she is actively doing and will continue to do so long as she has the means to do so. So if you boost her profile or her finances, you are contributing to that problem. You cannot separate her from this property. So that having all been said, there's a very obvious issue for anyone who either is queer or cares about queer people, in particular trans people, with anything Harry Potter related. And we tend to have issue with anybody who signs on to be involved with this. Now, I'm going to start naming some specific names and drawing some parallels, but let's go back to that thing I said earlier. The thing of not painting everybody with the same brush. Because here's who I feel I should not be, nor should anyone else be, applying the kind of metrics I'm talking about, even though they're involved with the project. Because anyone who is at the ground level of, say, the production, so your production assistants, your lighting tech assistants, your animators for the special effects, these are people who, well, one of two things is possibly at play. If they are individual contractors, if they are that low on the totem pole, odds are they need to take the jobs that they get. And they probably can't pick and choose. And if they were to turn down this job, they wouldn't know when they're going to get another one. That being said, while I wouldn't blanket condemn these people, I'm also not going to blanket excuse them because I don't know their individual financial situations. Anyone in a position like that, if you have the ability to turn down this job and wait for another one, I implore you to do so. So there's that. And secondly, especially when you get into things like the special effects or even something like the catering, somebody who is catering for the new upcoming Harry Potter TV show, that individual person didn't get hired to do that. The catering company they work for got contracted to do that, and then their bosses assigned them to that specific contract. They didn't choose to be there, but they need to be. They don't have that much control. When you are low enough on the totem pole, you do not have that much control over what jobs you do or don't get, or what jobs you can afford to turn down. I would actually put not only those, but a lot of the, I don't like to use the term low level in regards to actors, especially if you're actually appearing in anything, good for you. But low level actors, people who are background or who are appearing in like one scene, like whoever is going to be cast to play the businessman that Uncle Vernon gets mad that his Japanese golfer joke gets interrupted and he didn't get to tell it to this guy. Whoever plays that businessman is not going to be a big enough name and probably not working as steadily enough to be able to afford to turn down a role. And actually, tiny tangent, a lot of people in roles that small when it comes to these big productions, they don't always even know what they're auditioning for. A lot of roles in stuff like this, so that they don't get overly flooded with applications and or they don't end up having details of the production leaked, they will often audition those sorts of people with sides that are representative or in the flavor of the character and the work that they're going to be in, but aren't actual direct things from the project, so that, again, they're keeping a fairly tight lid on it. Now, you can't do that with the bigger names, because once you get to someone like Michelle Gomez, Hugh Laurie, Riz Ahmed, that one hurt too, because he's one of the main characters in my favorite film, Nimona. So yeah, that didn't feel good. But of course, also the folks in the TV series like John Lithgow and Nick Frost. These are people who can afford to pick and choose their jobs. If they had turned down this job, another one would have been waiting for them. They could have literally done anything. They don't need to do this. And also, just to be clear, the child actors in the TV show and the audio drama, children that young do not have control over their careers. Their careers are in the hands of their parents and their agents. So if you want to blame anybody, blame them. Leave the kids alone, especially at this early point. So that all having been said, if I at least am, I suppose for an unkind way to put it, letting off the hook people like that, those sort of low-level positions, the ground-level people, the grunts, the day workers, they, as far as I'm concerned, there's no need to hold a grudge against them. I mean, that would be hard. You're not going to know the names of most of these people unless you go way out of your way anyways. But then we get to the more high-profile people. And while I'm going to focus on actors, I would say anyone who is notable enough within the industry to be a department head or one of the key creatives. So your head writer, your directors, whoever's leading the editing department, your head cinematographer, the lead makeup or lead costume design, anyone who's leading the department, they probably have built up enough of a career that they could have taken another job. The seamstress sewing a costume, maybe not. The costume designer who is instructing that seamstress, yeah, probably. But again, I am going to focus on the actors, but I don't want you to think that the issue is only actors. It's literally anybody who can afford to not be there. I'm going to have some degree of issue with. And I do emphasize the phrase, some degree. Now, I'm sure some folks out there are going to have the whole thing of like, well, what if they just don't care about the politics? Well, like, politics exists whether you care about them or not. Whether you care or have any particular interest in or even are aware of what JK Rowling is doing with her money and her influence doesn't change the fact that she's doing it, and if you help her, you're contributing to it. Your intent or lack of knowledge or lack of desire to have an opinion doesn't alter any of that. So we're going to toss that one out the window right off the bat. So Michelle Gomez is the main one I'm going to focus on. My initial gut reaction on seeing that was, again, visceral disappointment. But part of me still wanted to be like, okay, I don't know if I'm in a forgiving mood, but I am going to acknowledge the gradations, because to compare the work on the audio dramas to the TV show, and this, if this comparison doesn't make total sense to you, I'm going to circle back onto an aspect that'll make it clearer. But to get upset about somebody who is taking those audiobook gigs and getting as upset with them as the folks taking the TV show gig, here's the comparison that I would make. Imagine somebody is just the worst. Like, what they believe is bad, what they're doing is bad, and like, I don't... Now, there's a comparison that I want to make. I'm not going to, just because that's going to become the headline for a bunch of people. She said that JK Rowling was literally like... And no, I'm not going to say that. But you know what? Let's say Kanye West. Kanye West, who has gone completely off the deep end, has said some very kind things about Hitler in front of Alex Jones. Kanye West gave Alex Jones pause. And yet somehow he also has a bunch of fans. Still, it's a more apt comparison than maybe I thought. But knowing what he is, what he says, what he does, and what he believes, I would compare the taking of the audio drama gig to the taking of the TV show gig in this way. The audio drama is like somebody took a one-off contract gig to work with Kanye West. The TV show is like taking a 7-year continuous employment contract to work with Kanye West. Both are bad. One is worse. I am still going to ask both people, why'd you decide to work with Kanye West at all? Why'd you think that was a good idea? So that was sort of my gut instinct. I was upset with Michelle Gomez, but not as upset or as disappointed as I am with folks like John Lithgow, Nick Frost, or any of the other folks who have taken the higher end adult roles in the Harry Potter show. But I was still frustrated and disappointed. Then she put out a statement. And it was a statement I found interesting because it's something that I don't see a lot of. Because, like, let's be honest, most times that statements like these get issued, it's a little bit of PR work. Honestly, these kinds of people don't really say something most of the time, but it's either a very soft non-apology or it's a double down, if it gets acknowledged at all. But this wasn't either of those. This was what she said.
To my LGBTQ plus fans, and especially the trans community, I want to speak directly to the concerns that have been raised about my involvement in this project. I hear you, and I understand why this is painful for many. I want to be clear that I stand with trans people, and I support trans rights, fully and without hesitation. When I accepted this role, I did so as someone who has always loved the stories and what they meant to so many, especially those who found comfort and identity in that world. I now understand more clearly how deeply complicated and hurtful this association can feel, and I take that seriously. Being an ally means listening even when it's uncomfortable, and taking accountability where it's needed. I'm committed to doing both.
And that, as far as something that appeared in an Instagram story, which I do have my issues with issuing stuff that way because it's temporary and it'll go away. That's a little bit of a PR thing, because if you put it on your main feed on Instagram, then people can find it again and they'll wonder what you're talking about. They'll look it up and it reignites the thing. So, like, I get why they do it in a way that goes away. People are going to save it anyway, but still, there's a little bit of cowardice to that. But regardless, I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded me of something that I think so many people have forgotten, but Halle Berry was at one point cast to be in a work, and she was going to play a trans man. Now, this was after the whole kerfuffle of Scarlett Johansson being cast to play a trans man, which blew up significantly bigger in the news. Now, Halle Berry was then cast to play a trans man, and shortly after it was announced, she then said she was dropping out of the project. And what she said was, "Over the weekend, I had the opportunity to discuss my consideration of an upcoming role as a transgender man, and I'd like to apologize for those remarks. As a cisgender woman, I now understand that I should not have considered this role and that the transgender community should undeniably have the opportunity to tell their own stories. I'm grateful for the guidance and critical conversation over the past few days, and I will continue to listen, educate, and learn from this mistake. I vow to be an ally in using my voice to promote better representation on screen, both in front of and behind the camera." She put her money where her mouth was, rather than like going, I have the right to be here and I should be allowed to play whatever I want, which is basically what Scarlett Johansson did. Even though she dropped out of that project, she bitched about it. Halle Berry went, "Oh my gosh, I didn't understand. I'm sorry, I won't do it." And Michelle Gomez's comment kind of reminded me of that. Now, there is a major key difference. Halle Berry isn't doing the project. And if you think that the fact that Michelle Gomez isn't dropping out negates this statement, well, here's something to be clear on. So while I unfortunately wasn't able to find 100% concrete confirmation of this, I am basically certain that Michelle Gomez has already recorded her work for the audio drama. Here's why. The cast was announced at the same time as the release date was announced. The first one is coming out in November, and then they are being released once a month until all 7 are out. There's no way that that would be the release schedule if they didn't already have all the audio recordings of the performances in hand. Because editing these things is going to be a lot of work. Because understand, it's not just a matter of getting, the right takes from everybody. They have to create a whole soundscape. There is all this audio engineering. They have to create all this stuff in audio in order to make it work. And there would not be enough time for them to still be recording this and have them all get released on that schedule. So it's not possible for her to fully do what Halle Berry did and go, I'm sorry, I'm walking away from the project. She can't. It's already done. So accepting that, it did still remind me of the Halle Berry thing quite a bit. And which means that for me personally, at least, I am viewing Michelle Gomez the same way I did Halle Berry at the time, which is I'm going to give you some grace on this. Consider yourself on probation. I'm going to keep an eye on you. But if you can keep your nose clean from here on out, I will accept this as a mistake. And that's sort of what I mean by how much grace are we willing to give people? Because people do in fact make mistakes. Here's one that I really want to address. Because I think it's very easy, and I've had to tell a number of groups this in slightly different contexts. It's very easy to forget that not everyone knows the things you know. And if you are really into something and really invested in something, it can be difficult to accept that or to remember it. I've had to bring this up to geeks and fans of geeky media when talking about the need for mainstream appeal, especially of movies, because ultimately, while the fans of the work in its original form, especially with something like comic books, are an important part of the audience for this, they are not the only audience. There aren't enough of them. Most people who make Marvel movies or Superman or what have you into big blockbusters don't know the comics beyond the broadest possible strokes. Those of us who actually know and obsess over these things are the minority. And in the case of something like Harry Potter, it is worth remembering, while it can be really difficult sometimes to have it make sense in your head, how could somebody not know what JK Rowling has been doing? Some people don't. It's unbelievable for those of us who are in deep and invested in this, but some people just don't. A lot of people just don't look into what is going on with the authors of stuff that they like, especially if they're not still currently engaged with it. Like someone who read Harry Potter as a series 10, 20 years ago, whatever, and for them it's just been oh, that was a thing from my childhood that I liked. They wouldn't have a reason to be keeping up with what JK Rowling is doing. And if you're thinking, oh, but it's been covered in all these news things. Yeah, but we're living in a time where you pick and choose what news you view. If you're not looking at the gossipier end of things, or if you're not looking at that particular kind of political coverage, you might not come across it. It's not like the old days where the news all reported the same stories. Now, do I think that Michelle Gomez had absolutely no idea? No, I don't. I would be surprised if she had no idea about the issue with JK Rowling. But I think to her, from her perspective, the audio thing, which would not have taken that long in terms of the amount of time needed from her, and it's obviously, much smaller in the scope of the big marketing push, which is all going to be on the TV show. I think in her view, well, this is a smaller ancillary thing. Yes, it's connected, but it's not the main thing. So maybe that's not such a problem. And that's part of what I like about her response. She doesn't claim to not know, which is part of why this is my suspicion. She basically says that she didn't fully understand why this specific thing that she did was also going to be a problem. There's an implication there that she does understand that supporting Rowling is a problem, maybe being involved in the show is a problem, but this is a smaller side thing. And maybe she thought she could just touch the edge of this thing and it wouldn't be a problem. But she also seems to be acknowledging, yeah, I didn't get it. And I get it now. And I don't want, to be a problem. I want to be an ally to trans people. And I believe in your rights, which I hope future actions from her will bear that out. Now, I do feel the need to touch on this because if I don't, someone's going to bring it up to the comments. No, her apology on this, statement might be a better word, but her words on all this in no way are equivalent to the folks like Papa Esiadu signing that open letter, stating their belief in support of trans rights, because that gesture was, I'm sorry, frankly, meaningless. While I can't say to a certainty that Michelle Gomez would have left the project if she still had time to do so, it is at least possible. Papa Esiadu, anyone else who signed that thing and is willing to work with Rowling, they're still doing the work. That's not okay. But having said that, even putting his name on that open letter at least shows a clear intent to try and make some degree of difference, as small as that might be, honestly, basically immeasurably small. But even that is better than Nick Frost, who actively wanted this job, apparently, for a while. And while he has said he doesn't share Rowling's views, he has made the classic mistake of framing it as a difference of opinion. It's not. It's people's rights to exist at all as themselves. That is not an issue of opinion. To call them opinions at all is to belittle the issue. And while this comment he made in an interview is even more empty than Papa Esiadu putting his name on that petition, at the very least, Frost does at least acknowledge that a problem exists, and I'll give the tiniest single grain of sand amount of credit for responding to a question about whether or not the show can overcome and not be overshadowed by the controversy. He said, you know what? Maybe it should get overshadowed by the controversy. I'll agree with that at least. So this is even less than Papa Esiadu did, but even this is more than John Lithgow has done, whose response to the entire thing has basically amounted to, I don't understand what the problem is. And you know what, guy? Seriously, I appreciate your work and I've loved you for a long time, but fuck you. And while I have made a distinction between these three men, it is worth remembering that that is very much splitting hairs because all three of them have committed to multiple years invested in bringing this TV show to life. That is multiple years they have willingly signed on to a project that will benefit JK Rowling financially and in terms of her reputation and relevance. No matter how much or how little they acknowledge that the problem exists or how many petitions they put their names on, that cannot offset this. Not when it is a long-term commitment that they are sticking by. And this is why I'm making a distinction between the people who agreed to be in the show and the people who did the audio drama. Although I will note, of those people at time of recording, Michelle Gomez is the only one who has issued any kind of statement. Everybody else involved has been incredibly silent. But I think it is flatly disingenuous to act as if a 1 or 2 month job that she did as a one-off is equivalent to a multiple year commitment. And again, I am going to stress, this isn't forgiveness. This is probation. This is, let me keep an eye on you. Because this was not something that for me at least is going to make me necessarily condemn you forever. But I am going to be like, okay, but I'm watching you now. But if she doesn't do something like this again, if she keeps to her word and her actions back up what she says, then yeah, I would be prepared to let this go. Other people might not. They might decide that this taints her forever in their eyes and makes it impossible to enjoy her work. And I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but I'm going to circle back to what I said near the start. Be careful about painting everybody with the same brush, because it's not the same. Is it all bad, like being involved in any of this that supports her? Yes, it is. But it's not all the same. So treating it like it's the same doesn't help. And it actually makes it harder for people who did make a mistake and who want to do better if they are treated as though that one thing that they did wrong will be a reason that they are never forgiven. You're not incentivizing people to be better. You're trying, I know you think you're trying to incentivize them never to screw up in the first place, but we're human beings, we screw up. Don't take what I'm saying here to mean that everybody gets blanket forgiveness, everybody gets like one freebie.
Everybody gets one.
No, this is a case-by-case basis thing. I've laid out my case for why this is not the same, and if you intend to give somebody a pass, I expect you to make your case. Don't point to this and say, well, she said it was okay to forgive people. It is case-by-case. Treat it that way, and don't use the idea that everybody screws up as an excuse to forgive everything, and especially if it's something that somebody has done repeatedly. Again, the people who are in the show have committed to years and years and years of this, and they're still there. So, again, whatever petitions they sign or whatever words they say, I don't really care. I did just want to focus on this because it's something that people have been sending me, like tagging me in, and I think there was a certain expectation that I would at least have feelings on this. And again, I thought I could talk about it in a short. Obviously, that wasn't the case, but while it is important to call out people, if there is a possibility for them to take corrective action, I think it's worth giving them the space to do that, rather than condemning them as if there is no possible way for them to do better. Now, don't twist my words. Don't twist that as being, so JK Rowling can be redeemed at this point? Not really, no. Again, the amount of damage she has done, even if she did a 180 on all of this and started pouring her money into undoing everything she's done, if you wreck my house but pay to fix it, okay, thank you for doing right and amending the problem. I'm still allowed to hold a grudge against the fact that you wrecked my house in the first place. So, nuance. It's the thing. Nothing is ever always. There isn't one thing that we do every time. It is not one size fits all. There is nuance. There are specifics. There are times that I will say we should generally try and do this, but then here's the exception. There are times that I will say we should generally avoid doing this, but here's the exception. There will always be exceptions. There will always be individual specifics. There will be general, broad-reaching guidelines that I have for myself and that hopefully you have for yourselves.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
But guidelines are just that. They are not laws of the universe. Ultimately, I had to get that off my chest. Again, I thought, I can get that in under 3 minutes. Yeah, right, bitch. Who are you kidding? Anyways, what are your thoughts on any of this? Try and be polite to the best of your ability and don't start fights in the comments. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. You also would have gotten to see this video early if you supported me there. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Don't worry, the rats are all fine, but my rat wrangler is not here right now, and I thought we could have Archie say hi. Or not.